Well, welcome to the Cost of Courage podcast, everyone. Today we have Colonel John Nestor here with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
So Colonel John Nestor hails from Middlefield, Ohio. He was commissioned as an active duty ordnance officer through ROTC at Norwich University in 2002. He is assigned to the 63rd Readiness Division as the Congressional Legislative Liaison and Director of Strategic Communications. Colonel Nestor has held multiple leadership and staff positions as a regular Army soldier, Troop Program Unit Reserve Soldier, and Active Army Reserve Soldier. He has been in positions supporting and leading maintenance and logistic operations, maintenance and training organization as an inspector general and in installation management. He has served in several theaters, including 2 combat deployments in support of Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. Colonel Nestor is married to his college sweetheart and Army veteran Courtney of North Kingstown, Rhode Island, and you guys have 5 children.
Yep.
That's amazing. Did I miss anything in that incredible bio?
No, that's me in a nutshell.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, we're so grateful that you're here today.
Thanks, Kelly.
And, we're just going to jump right into some questions.
Sure.
And I was just very curious. I'm always curious about this particular question of what inspired you to join the military and specifically why the Army?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I get the opportunity to share that story in my current role, which really is an outreach role for the Army Reserve, and talking to young people, talking to young people's parents, other professionals, to make sure that we tell the Army Reserve story and the Army story to the public. I've always wanted to be in the military. My father was drafted during the Vietnam War, the beginning of the Vietnam War, in the Air Force. And it wasn't anything that he really touted. It just had happened, right? He had some gear in the garage. He had a couple of frames, shadow boxes on the wall in his office. But he was a bit of a historian. So at an early age, I was always watching the A&E documentaries on the Vietnam War. And so it was always kind of a part of my life and upbringing. And then growing up into my high school years, I was very active in Boy Scouts. And so always, we had a very outdoor family. And I was very serious in the Boy Scouting. So always outdoors, always doing adventures. And there was a natural connection to doing outdoor stuff with military service. There was the rigor of structure. And then the idea of service, the service was there as well. So it was kind of funny because I was going, every time we move, you kind of go through things that you've never seen before. And
Sure.
I came across this high school portfolio. I think it was high school, and it you had to do your family coat of arms. And on that coat of arms, it probably was done my sophomore year in high school. It had some military stuff on there, right? So I could tell that I wanted, that had inklings of service. And then I had always been intrigued by going to West Point.
Oh.
Right. And through Boy Scouts, West Point held a camping event there in New York, and I was living in Ohio. And my troop went to go visit West Point for the weekend and did this camp out with hundreds of other Boy Scout units. And so the campus was open. You got to work with cadets on doing the different activities. There was a hike over one of their training areas, and so I was set like I'm going to West Point.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. I want to go in the military. I wasn't really necessarily focused on being a career, but I knew I wanted to be an officer, and I wanted to go in the Army. That just kind of drew me to it. And then I had learned about the senior military colleges. So people are familiar with the Citadel and VMI, but Norwich is another one up in Vermont. And my father had some professional business back in the 70s, I think, maybe the early 80s with Norwich. And so he told me about the school. And so I was looking at West Point and the senior military colleges, and then the National Scholarship Program for all the services. And so coming from a family, my parents were both educated, but we were in agriculture, both dairy farmers. It was you're gonna go to college. You got to figure out how to get there.
Sure.
And so it just makes sense. Well, let's be competitive for one of the ROTC scholarships, and for and putting in a packet for West Point. But I really fell in love with the idea of going to one of the senior military colleges. I don't really know why, but Vermont particularly, from Northeast Ohio. I love the cold. I fell in love with the school when I first went there, so I kind of put all my eggs in the basket for Norwich. And I applied for all the scholarships. But the one that gave me a scholarship to go to Norwich to study the program that I wanted to study was business, was Norwich. And so I took the scholarship there. I envisioned being a career guy while I was at school. I mean, I just absolutely loved the lifestyle. Yeah. And I thought it would be a great way to project after my military career also, so to set me up for something else.
Absolutely. So you love the cold. How are you liking California?
So most of my military career has been in the Southeast, or the South. So over here it's a little more temperate, but I'm becoming soft, I think.
Yes. Are you loving the sunshine? That's good.
Yes.
I'm happy you're here, and but I've heard Vermont is beautiful.
It's absolutely fantastic. That's the first place that I ever saw snow coming down vertically. So Northeast Ohio, lake effect snow. So Lake Erie's there, and Lake Erie causes us to have a lot of snow, but it's relatively flat. So the wind likes to come at you, or the snow likes to come at you, right? And so as a prospective student, my father and I went to visit Norwich. It was right after Thanksgiving break, before Christmas, and we got to campus, and there had to be 4 feet of fresh powder on our quad. And then that night we went to Montpelier, where our hotel was, and it was like out of a Norman Rockwell scene.
Oh my gosh, that's what you think of,
Yes, these dinner plate size flakes of snow coming straight down.
Way.
It was just, this is great. And it was like that all my 4 years there. A lot colder than Ohio, but it was fantastic.
You're making it sound
fantastic.
Good. You know, if anyone's interested in going there, they should talk to you.
Definitely.
I mean, and that's good. You know, it's good that you had a good experience and you obviously chose the school that was right for you.
Yes.
And it's obviously gotten you where you are, which is an incredible career, that we'll get into. And you kind of got into my next question, which thank you, by the way. But maybe you can add to this, were you always destined for leadership? It sounds like you wanted to go to, a school for officers. You wanted to be in that program. But did that general interest kind of develop over time as you got a taste of what leadership would be like? Or was that kind of like always your path and you knew that's where you wanted to be?
So I think my time in scouting helped me hone or develop some sense of leadership ability. And then I realized, you have the opportunity to change trajectory and not control, but direct an organization, no matter how small it is. And you can do that as an enlisted soldier, of course, right? Going through the ranks, becoming a non-commissioned officer. I just felt there was something a little bit different. You could work at a different scale, not so focused on a craft, but your primary focus is on leadership and supporting the organization.
That makes sense. And, that kind of gets into my next thing is, how you would describe your leadership style, now and how it's evolved over the years.
I wouldn't consider myself an extrovert, but I can be a people person. Okay. I think I'm naturally empathetic. So working with people, building some consensus, helping develop and share a vision, I think is a skill that I've honed and grown through my career.
Did any of your leaders inspire you in any way? And this could be good leaders or bad leaders, make you kind of take those lessons learned of, I want to do things just like that person did them, or I want to avoid that leadership style at all costs.
Well, I think it's really important to remember that you're never going to be able to emulate, and nor should you ever emulate one person or one leader.
Okay.
Or expect something negative to come from a particular leader, right? So eliminating bias. And I think I went into the Army originally assuming I was going to find an officer or someone, a mentor who is, that is the meter stick on which I'm going to perform against.
Yep.
And that maybe was my struggling point for me, because I looked for that person for the first few years of my active duty career, and I didn't. But I was blessed with a multitude of leaders who had great character, different skills, different focuses, and in that in itself is much more valuable than that one individual person, because then you really develop yourself. Yeah. Uniquely, I found myself surrounded by a significant number of female leaders.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. So I'll tell you, and my wife will attest to this, and many in my generation will attest to this. Norwich was a very kind of a machismo culture. It was men and women there, right? But it was very focused on combat arms, and there was a time period there where, women had to perform exceptionally better, right? Or perceivedly so, to be on the same plane. And my first unit, I showed up to it, and my company commander was a female. My company first sergeant was a female.
Okay.
And the senior lieutenant was a female, right? And my mind was immediately blown away. I figured I'm going to show up to this unit in Germany, and we are going to be gung ho, and it's going to be men all the way.
Yeah.
And for 3 years and a first deployment, that was the leadership team. So it was immediate culture shock, and then learning leadership from a completely different perspective.
For sure.
And then as I progressed, I found myself being under the leadership of several females who showed a different angle than I would ever have expected. So maybe breaking my mentality, my biases. And then, of course, many great male leaders. And I would say there are not one in any perspective, but if I look at a particular leadership trait that I have or a problem that I have to solve, I will look at any of those for something. And taking care of soldiers, I think really that came from working for female mentors in my career and peers.
That's incredible. And do you still talk to any of them? Are they kind of like your mentors in a way? I mean, maybe not all of them, but just one or two that you still connect with?
Well, thank goodness for social media. So of course, Lieutenant Colonel retired Karen Saravia.
Okay.
She was that company commander, and I disconnected for a little while. We spoke through my career, and then I met up with her in about 2016. When I was working at Fort Bragg, she was working there.
That's great. The moment was right for her, yeah.
Yep. Now Sergeant Major Vicki Hobson. We connect over social media.
That's great.
And then now Colonel Erin Frazier, then Harkins, she is actually a brigade commander now, and we were War College classmates in Pennsylvania. We met back at War College for a while. Maybe more socially, but every once in a while we'll drop notes just to see how each other's doing, and just to see, right? Because I think just observing leadership you're going to get a ton out of that too, because it's how are you perceived, right? So, so definitely. And then I have a multitude of others that I keep. I wouldn't say I have one mentor. I know a lot of my colleagues have someone that they will say, well, this is my mentor. They'll have a list, and maybe I should have that. But really, it's I like the network and the family, right? That tribe of people that I can go to.
And I think that's really good advice for anyone listening. That you're not looking for that one person. It's right. A myriad of things and traits and qualities from everyone that comes into your path, and even the ones that you clash with, even the ones that you maybe were more challenging of a relationship than others. I think there's always something to gain from those experiences, and it sounds like you've done really well with
the
that.
good and the bad, and understanding why decisions are made, and the perspective those decisions are being made from is really important, right? Because I don't know if I have ever run into a bad leader, like a bad person, right? Everyone is trying to do good.
Sure.
Maybe the way that they're going about it is perceived or, needs to be adjusted, right? And the Army does a pretty good job of putting the right people in the right positions. Maybe things just don't always work out. There's going to be friction.
Yeah. And, and they might be the right leader for a different team. Yeah. It just doesn't gel, So it's good that you give people grace to, it's not a reflection like you're a bad person. It just wasn't the right fit.
Right.
So, but it's good that they realize that and maybe take somebody out of the, that situation before,
No, exactly.
there's negative consequences.
Exactly.
So, and, you've talked a lot about really, good experiences with leaders. So, what would you say was your most rewarding experience? And I know you're still serving, so, but so far, your most rewarding experience in the service.
I don't know if I can put my finger on the most rewarding experience. So back to my origin story, right?
Yeah.
So when you're a cadet, after your junior summer, you're getting ready you've done your advanced camp, you've got all these evaluations, and you're going to go and get your branch. Like, you have no idea what the Army wants you to do. All right. You kind of, you got a wish list.
Yeah.
And so my top three was engineer, armor, and then ordnance. So engineer, of course, they're building stuff, blowing things up, horizontal, vertical, right? And I think that ties back to my my growing up in agriculture, working on machinery with dealing with heavy machinery with my family. It was very familiar, right? And I like the idea of building. Armor, tanks, and I'll be frank. I like the idea of being in a combat arms, but the idea of being an infantryman and walking everywhere, my exposure to that would seem to be extremely boring. We did a lot of that as the fundamental level of training in cadet land as a cadet. And, we would hike out there with a heavy pack, wait for somebody to come up, you do an ambush, and then you walk to it and do it over again. So it seems boring. I got a lot of my best friends are infantrymen. God bless you. Whatever. So I said, well, I like to do that, but I'll use big guns on tracks and drive there, or whatnot. And then my third one was ordnance. So one of my professors was an ordnance officer at Norwich, and he was in maintenance.
Okay.
And I learned what he had done. And then also one of my classmates was in the National Guard as a welder. And a welder as an enlisted soldier is in the ordnance branch. So that caused me to open up and, well, what other things does the ordnance branch do? And, from fabrication to heavy equipment repair.
Yeah.
I love turning wrenches. I'm a gearhead. I will fix my own cars.
Perfect for you.
And I said, well, this is great. So if I can't drive heavy equipment, shoot big guns, I'll work on them. And then so the Army decided, hey, you're going to go be an ordnance officer. And I was maybe regretting it at first. And then I went to the force. And so when I went to the force and I went to the maintenance company under then Captain Karen Saravia, that maintenance platoon with those maintenance soldiers, they were kind of just like me. They loved turning wrenches. They worked hard. They worked on equipment over the weekends because it was their responsibility to get it up. There was a great amount of esprit de corps and just getting the job done. And so I think that was hugely influential to me, understanding soldier mentalities, how soldiers work, and their passion towards their craft. And then the individuals that support the maintenance structure. And then second to that would probably be a few years ago, I was assigned down to Fort Hunter Liggett, California.
Oh, yeah.
On the garrison staff as the deputy under Colonel retired Lisa Lamb. And that leader gave me so much trust from day one to work in an area that I had no experience in. We were all foreign to how installations work. You're dealing mostly with a completely different structure.
Sure.
Different monies, different business, and then mostly civilians, career civilians. Yeah. So changing leadership styles, and then also everything is long-term, long vision, right? So essentially the things you're working on today, you're setting up for the commander maybe 2 and 3 down. And so Lisa gave me so much leeway, gave me so much trust to experiment and work and almost break things and get them set up. Yeah. And that was probably one of the highlights of my career. One being a platoon leader, an initial entry platoon leader, and being a deputy garrison commander. Fantastic opportunities.
It sounds amazing. And And it's wonderful that you identify that, and it's not, it sounds like it was a continuous experience for you. And again, I think all of this gets to what's built you as a leader. It's all gotten you to this point. And I mean, with rewarding experiences, there's always challenging ones. So I always like to ask, and maybe this wasn't a particular situation, but any challenges you can identify over the years that, happen, and then what you learned from them.
I think I've been blessed with having great support in the time of adversity.
Okay.
That has prevented me from really falling on my face. I've had great non-commissioned officers who've mentored me and smacked me upside the back of the head to say, hey, where are you going? We're not even going to go turn right here because we know better. Yeah. And then I think I'm thankful that I've had clarity of mind to be humble enough to take that guidance.
That's good. And at least I just really appreciate how you learn from all the experiences that you've had, and bringing it now to where you are in your current role with the 63rd. If you could just tell us a little bit about what your role is, what your responsibilities are, just for our audience that may not be familiar. Sure.
So for the Army Reserve, the Army Reserve is broken up into 4 geographic commands. And the 63rd Readiness Division supports the 7 states in the Southwest and West, starting from California, Nevada, down to Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And that organization is responsible for all of the facilities, Army Reserve-owned facilities, almost 200 facilities. Also responsible for maintenance of equipment. So there's economies of scale. Instead of small units managing their equipment, we put these pieces of equipment in large fleets and essentially manage them. Also, again, because our supported units have skeleton staffs during the week, we support them with HR, human resources tasks, so cutting orders, paying soldiers. And then also we have our own units that are tied to us. Smaller units that you don't typically see. So Army Reserve chaplain detachments, public affairs organizations, and structure there. And there's still some modernization with the structure. But my role as a special staff member is the Congressional Legislative Liaison. And in that role is to liaise with, of course, federal, but local elected officials, community members, and then really tell the Army Reserve story. One, there's a lot of questions that come from constituents to those offices. So being able to avoid formal congressional inquiries, which can all be awfully painful, and they're really commander focused. I can have continuous dialogue with them so they can converse with their constituents. Also, dealing with local communities, chambers of commerce, just to support and tell the Army Reserve story. Now, the Director of Strategic Communication, this is kind of an ad hoc title. I joke that it's kind of out of convenience, right? Because you have all these special staff organizations like the Public Affairs Office, the Command Historian's Office. In the Army Reserve, we have Army Reserve ambassadors, so the coordinator for that program. Those are all individual leaders running those programs, so instead of them being managed by the commander directly, I'm put in there as an intermediary. But it makes a ton of sense because really we're external communicators talking outside of operations to the public, to partners. And really we want to tell the Army and the Army Reserve story out to the public. I think I'm in a great position because the Army Reserve soldier, he is in your communities. You may not know that he's probably, he's working in your emergency room as a doctor. He may be a truck driver. He may be working in your school as a teacher. He may be the principal. She may be doing a myriad of other things in your community. But that is a touch point with a federal force touches the civilian community. The Fort Braggs of the world, the big Fort Hoods of the world, they're isolated, focus on that mission. Every day a soldier doing their mission. Army Reserve soldiers, they're the citizen soldier. Now, there's some confusion maybe of, well, what does the National Guard do versus the Army Reserve? Well, the Army Reserve is a federal force. We are the reserve to the active duty force. The National Guard primarily works for the governor of a state. So here in California, the heroes of the National Guard, the Air National Guard, and the Army National Guard, you know them for doing their firefighting. They are helping with crowd control. They're helping with major events. They're helping, search and rescue. For example, with the Air National Guard. Out back east, where I'm from, they're always out in force during snowstorms, pulling people out of ditches. You saw a lot of them during Hurricane Katrina, if you can harken back to that. A lot of guardsmen work for the state. Whereas the Army Reserve, in order for us to directly support the community, it has to go through a whole myriad of approval process. So that's not to say the Army Reserve was heavily involved during the COVID response, setting up medical stations, issuing immunizations. And we also provide, we have trained and ready forces to support civil authorities in the event of major disasters. But primarily the state focuses on the Guard. And they're also more of a combat-oriented force. So everyone's probably familiar with combat divisions. You've heard of the 82nd Airborne Division. You've heard of the 1st Cavalry Division. And those are guys and gals that operate major combat systems. They go in as a brigade combat team, and they fight. And they have support also with them that come with the Guard, right? But they can mobilize, deploy, and fight as a combat force. The Army Reserve, we don't have any combat. We have one battalion of infantry that's out in Hawaii. But all of the rest of our formation are a support structure. So we are the truck drivers. We're the fuelers. We have combat support hospitals. Technology folks. We have a large contingent of 2 major organizations of engineers, vertical, horizontal combat engineers. Tons of support assets, a majority of the active forces support assets. And we do that at a fraction of the cost because we're part-time soldiers, right? So you may have a truck driver on the Army Reserve side, but he's a long-haul trucker working for one of the big box distribution centers, right? So he's professional. He does that all the time. And that's where they build their readiness and their skill. Yeah. So those are the big differences there. And that's why I think telling the Army Reserve story is so important, because many Americans don't understand the difference.
No.
And they don't understand the opportunities that are there either in the Army Reserve versus the National Guard when you're looking at part-time service, if we want to call it part-time service.
Yeah, but I think you did a great job explaining that, that people have these jobs, they're civilian jobs outside of that service. And, it really does build that skill set. Mm-hmm. And, and that part about people I don't think know the difference. They see the uniform and there's really no difference between right. The reserve and the typical enlisted,
the National Guard, right,
yeah right. So I really appreciate that distinction that you made. And one thing that I was wondering, because you were talking about your role as a liaison mm-hmm. with legislature, and working closely with community leaders, politicians, networking with local agencies, all of these kinds of things. Was this always your comfort zone? Is this always something that you're like, oh, I really want to do this, to collaborate and to network with people that may not be necessarily military, or they're by proxy, associated with the military? Yep. Was this something that you were always interested in doing that aligned with your personality, or did that come with rank?
Absolutely not something I would have ever volunteered for, expected I would do at all. So this job was presented to me graduating the War College, Army War College.
Oh, okay.
Right? And they said, hey, this is, I really became passionate about Inspector General work.
Okay.
And so I was really looking to go back to that realm. But the powers that be said, hey, how about this? And I said, when they say, how about this, that means this is what you're going to get.
Right. You're voluntold.
You're voluntold. So, yeah. And so it was really an opportunity, a growing opportunity, right? I am in no way an extrovert. I have some of my colleagues probably would absolutely kill to have this job. Me, I have to put a lot of effort into it. But I will tell you, the partners, the people that I deal with, they make it easy, right? Our
good.
elected officials, our partners, they are. I don't say they love the military. They're very supportive of federal service, right? They're supportive of our community. There's only some areas of friction that I've had to work through because people don't know. And I will tell you, there's a big stereotype of California and
you don't
the military.
say.
Yeah, and I will say that largely, that stereotype is probably inaccurate just because it doesn't necessarily exist, and also it can be turned over very quickly.
For sure.
Where we work in your Moffett Field, there is a huge history of the Navy being in the Bay Area.
Yes.
And if you're at all any bit of a student of history, you realize the support that the San Francisco area in California has had during the Second World War. That was a Navy town. Mm-hmm. And up and down the coast we have all the services. Going as far down south as San Diego, where the Marine Corps is, and then installations. All the way on up the coast. And just by having conversations with people, they immediately maybe change their tone, or at least I give them an opportunity to kind of reflect. It's in some cases there's the this 1960s mentality of what the Army is, the 1980s mentality of what the Army was, the option of last chance. But when you start talking about things and how the Army and the Army Reserve is now, people start to understand that this is a deliberate career option.
Right.
And it's we're here to support the community, not to oppose it in any way, right? So just going through that journey, one, self-developmental for myself, when I change those biases and I talk with friends back east about, hey, this is not all that way. Yeah, there's a lot of differences, but things can be overcome just with conversations.
I'm so happy to hear that as a Californian. It's just there are a lot of those stereotypes that I think need to be broken because there's a lot to offer here, and it may not be what people see on TV or what they think. Right. There is definitely a rich history of service, especially in this area, and as you mentioned, all the way down the coast. Down through San Diego, Pendleton, up north. So it's definitely worth keeping an open mind, right. And I really appreciate that that's the approach that you bring to this role, and I think they chose the perfect person.
Oh, thanks.
So you're doing great, and it's actually how we were able to connect too. As what the foundation does, it's essentially one of those community partners with Moffett. So it's really it's good to be able to meet leaders like you who just understand.
Right.
And so one thing I wanted to talk to you about was this strategy you're developing, which I thought was really interesting, about reserve soldiers in our local region engaging their communities to essentially promote the Army, share all the wonderful things it has to offer, because you were kind of alluding to the fact that a lot of people don't realize what's out there for them, a career in the military could provide. Right. So how did this concept come about, and what is your hope for this program going forward?
Sure. So the typical TPU soldier, that would be like what we call the part-time soldier. Okay. They may stay in an organization their whole career. I have seen many times where someone will retire after 20 years of being in one small organization, maybe in one reserve center. That's atypical, but they're definitely going to be in that community. Before coming out here, I was in Orlando, and those folks are not leaving the greater Orlando area. They know the community, and culturally they're in a part of the community, whatnot. And so our reserve centers are located, almost 200 of them we have in our region. They're community based, and they draw to that community, right? It may not be a reserve center, but it is there's some gravity towards pulling that community into what Fort Hunter Liggett has. and the soldiers that work there, they're part of that regional community. So how better to engage, but to find those soldiers that live, work, and train in that area to talk to the community about recruitment opportunities, or just tell the story. A lot of folks think that I'm out there as a recruiter. I'm not a recruiter, but I do partner with recruiting because I think recruiting misses the mark. You know that our active duty force, Army, is doing much better than we have done in a long time. Our Army Reserve recruiting stinks, and it has been that way for a while. And there's a lot of reasons: internal, the focus, what our objectives are, and that's really because we want to have a strong federal full-time force, of course. But we can do a lot better with what we have. And using those folks in the King Cities and the Salinas to tell us how to communicate to that particular that organization or that community market is important. Also, the same thing in this area. When I talk to educators, there's a tremendous focus on medical, on technology, and we have Army Reserve soldiers who live, work in these areas. They're executives, they're engineers, and they can tell that story and help recruiting efforts looking for those specialties. That's
incredible. And I really think this is going to help. And one of my questions was like, how can we replicate this? Is there a plan to replicate this kind of model if it ends up working, if we're piloting it here? Would you share lessons learned with your counterparts in other regions? And is that your hope for this if it's successful here?
So, I'm not sure if this has happened in the past, but we kicked it off this year just last month, where I had some public affairs professionals come from some of our general officer level supported headquarters. So those are big 1- and 2-star headquarters that are within our region, and they have additional capability like public affairs officers who work on their staff. And we all met while we were talking with our Army Reserve ambassadors. Those are civilian volunteers that engage with the community on behalf of the Army Reserve. And we wanted to solve the problem of how do we use Army Reserve assets, particularly soldiers, equipment, and facilities, to highlight some of the engagements that our Army Reserve ambassadors do. So our Army Reserve ambassadors may go to the local school district and talk with kids,
right.
But sometimes they need some soldiers to come along, or to tell their Army story, or they want some equipment so that kids can see equipment, or that parents can talk to soldiers and leaders, or administrators can understand programs more than the Army Reserve ambassador. The Army Reserve ambassador really makes those connections. And so we wanted to know how can we bridge that gap,
right.
And then those headquarters have individual units at all those little bitty reserve centers. So how do we empower not necessarily commanders but groups of soldiers at those Army Reserve centers? There's a ton of requirements on our commanders now to make sure that our soldiers are ready, and so making a commander do another engagement is another thing they have to do.
Sure.
But there are capable soldiers who are into that, right? They're not like me. They're extroverts. They know the community at that local level. And how do we pair those public affairs officers and those commanders dealing with those or working with those small engagement cells at reserve centers to also support the ARA? So it's this whole network.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it happens anywhere else. I think it can be an enduring an enduring activity that we do, because it's getting us Army Reserve soldiers more in the position to tell our story more openly. We'd already do that. We do that poorly. So with that, we can collaborate with our other readiness divisions. And things change because our leaders change every 2-3 years. So things change, right? And my idea may be terrible to somebody else. They may do a much better job than I, and that's fine. But we really want to make sure that we're getting after this, telling our story more effectively. And I go back to, we do a bad job of telling our story now. I think a National Guard soldier, you kind of know a National Guard soldier when you see one, because they tout it more. They're in the they're doing the support to civil authorities often. They tend to be a combat arms guys, so there's a little more machismo. So they're maybe wearing, the T-shirt that says something on it, or they got some extra stickers on the back of their car windshield, right? You kind of know. Army Reserve guys, the ER doc working at Stanford, he doesn't have anything on his car, right?
Just chill about it.
It's a thing he does, right? And so I think we can do better at it, and if we focus on those small cells at Army Reserve centers, and we have the commander's support, I think we can do a lot better job.
I think you're right, and I mean, I think that it gets back to that maybe a little bit too humble side, of here's what they do, and personalizing it to the point where the community, you're out there and they're seeing your representatives and like you said, the equipment, and that could really change a kid's life. If you're talking about young people who are coming up and may be interested in something like this, but the problem is they don't know about it,
right? And
that's been the only hindrance. It's not that they wouldn't have an interest. So I think you're doing a really good job about just trying to get the word out there to the community at large. And then also, the benefit of what you guys do, not only for our community, but for our state, for our country. It's just getting that messaging out there.
Right.
And, just in the timely situation that we're in right now, the biggest challenges that are facing service members, I wanted to make sure we address this today, about how you're personally having to work to address those concerns. And circling back to what you were saying earlier, you're able to liaise with these community partners, with the politicians and people who could really make a difference in this time that we're in. Have those partnerships really come into play at this time, it's for the benefit of your unit and for the reserve in general?
I think so, because there's always questions out there, right? And we really focus, of course, on appropriators, folks who are able to drive federal budget and find things that are worthwhile spending money on. There's so many priorities. It's a lot easier for everybody to get behind building a new ship for the Navy than it is to support an Army Reserve installation that may have leaky pipes and whatnot, right? But both of them are important. And how do we get our seat at the table? I think that just constantly being persistent, being present, engaging those staffs and those congressmen and congresswomen is something that we do all the time and is very important. Just being accessible, and then making sure that message goes even to our community partners, because our community partners can speak on our behalf. And we have seen this, and it wasn't any of my doing. For example, Fort Hunter Liggett, I mentioned them, but they have a huge federal capability there. There's installations around them that require their ability to run particular networks. And we were able to get some support on one of our facilities there. And then throughout our region, you see programs popping up of particular interest. So it's very effective, and I'll tell you, I am somewhat shocked on how much elected officials don't necessarily know in depth of the capability of the Army Reserve. They know it exists, and they know the Guard, and the Guard, of course, very much so, because that's their constituency. But the nuances and the differences. So if you're not an appropriator sitting on those particular committees, who is this here? We have in our particular district where our headquarters is, Congressman Sam Liccardo just came in, and before him, Congresswoman Eshoo, huge supporter of the military in the 129th and Moffett Field, and Representative Liccardo comes from a different background, but totally open to hearing where we want to go, the challenges that we have, our opportunities. And I see that with all the offices, and the staffs are fantastic. Again, an area that I'm not necessarily comfortable always working in, but they're great people, always trying to do what they think is the best.
And that's what's good. And I think it just gets back to communicating and messaging, and not assuming people just understand.
Right.
And I really appreciate what you got at, where they may not be on a committee appropriating these funds. it just may not be on the radar.
Right.
And it's not that they don't care. It's just that, the messaging hasn't been there. So I think what you're doing is incredibly valuable. And I'm glad that there's even a role that exists for that, which I didn't think I ever realized, the reserve even had that kind of a role that they assigned.
Right.
So that's really good. And, just getting to the challenges, just, making sure that we drive this home of any advice that you could spare today for, any soldiers that are just starting out. They're in your situation, like when you were going, to Norwich, when you're just trying to get in, you don't know what you don't know. Are there any lessons that you can share that you wish you had known at the time, or any opportunities they could pursue that they may not know exist? And I know we touched on a lot of that, but or is it something that you just kind of have to learn as you go, and nobody can really tell you what to do?
That's a good question. I think you have to be open-minded.
Okay, good.
You can't have a set plan and expect everything to happen the way that you have it laid out. There's a handful of guys, some peers, they had some big goals lined up and they hit those goals, but I think their path adjusted from what they expected. The Army does a really good job of finding a fit for you, right? For your and I think that I am a better logistics officer than I would have been an engineer or an armor officer. I think whether it's training or, I changed my mindset, I feel that way. The positions that the Army told me to go to, I think they were the best fit for me.
That's good.
And they either challenged me in the right way or ultimately let me be successful in the right way while being humble, and gave me the right leaders. I think it's important to keep your eyes open about what's out there. I had a lieutenant who was on assignment for us for a while, and he had no idea what he wanted to do in the Army. When he went to college, he was an ROTC guy as well from a particular school, and he went in on his freshman year, and his senior year he had a completely different idea. Mm-hmm. And then now working for me for this portion of time, he learned a whole different skill set. And I think it changed the way that he looked at things, because he didn't realize that we do this kind of outreach work or the particular mission of the Readiness Division in general, because no one ever thinks about base operations. No. So I think you just need to be opened up. If you're a young person and you think that maybe service is a thing that you want to pursue, whether you want to do a 4-year stint or you want to either as an officer or as an enlisted soldier, if you want to make a career out of it, there are jobs that I don't even know that exist out there still. For example, I think being a cook in the military can be the butt of a lot of jokes. But there isn't a more hardworking MOS than our cooks. When you want to be home with your family, the cooks are in the kitchen. But the cooks also have the executive chef program. So these are the cooks that are the chefs for the White House. And they're the chefs for general officers. And these are renowned chefs. And they can progress through that way. Yeah. Our communicators. There are opportunities for people who set up networks and do communication, working for the White House communication staff. Yeah. There are tons of opportunities out there. And then specific MOSs. This just came my last commander. She was from the Medical Service Corps. So not only nurses and docs, but also technicians and people that fix medical equipment. So you can come into work, as a soldier working on CAT scan machines and X-ray machines and whatnot. And then even there are subsets of that as well. And then specialists in our Warrant Officer Corps. The career fields, I don't even know. I like to see a recruiter who knows all the career fields. I would be impressed. But there are tons of opportunities. I guarantee if there's something that you want to do, you see a civilian career out there, you can find it in America's Army, in Army Reserve. It's amazing opportunities that are out there.
And I think just that is something that most people don't know, and what's good is sometimes even what you thought you wanted to do, the Army knew better, and you end up in something you had no idea, but you're very proficient in. And I think that that's a fantastic message to anyone who just may not be on their radar. It's not going to take you away. It's actually going to help propel your career path in a lot of cases.
You know, I mentioned it earlier about I think there's this stigma that maybe the military is the avenue of last resort. And you hear a lot of Army stories when soldiers are like, oh, I didn't really know what I want to do when I got out of high school. Let me tell you, if you know what you want to do when you get out of high school, you probably have a problem. Seriously, because you haven't done anything, and that is good. And in this area, it's a pressure cooker for high school students.
Oh my goodness.
I think a lot of it is they saw successes from maybe their family or their family's industry, and they think that the same successes are going to be beholden to them. Yeah. And maybe so, and maybe you're gifted with that ability, or maybe you're gifted with the opportunity to do something different. I was talking to some high school juniors and seniors a few months back about what their plans were. Again, not trying to be a recruiter, just finding out who our young people are in our area. And several of them had a dream of getting into the medical field, docs and nurses for the most part. And then I said, ever think about being a doc or a nurse in the Army? I mean, you can get an Army Reserve scholarship to go to nursing school. Army scholarship to go to nursing school. So you go there, you get your 4 years paid for, and you receive a stipend. Then you get out of nursing school, and then you go into the Army's nursing school to teach you how to be an Army nurse. Yeah. Or you can go the medical route, and then to become a doc, you can get a scholarship, and then you can go to medical school while being paid an Army salary as a second lieutenant and become a Army doctor on the backside of that. And then you have a short period of time you have to pay for. So it can be, I want to be an Army doc, or I want the Army to pay for me to be an Army doc. It's a deliberate decision. They really are. It's, so many people, Norwich University had a civilian population and a military corps population. Yeah. And I remember being a second lieutenant at my first school, getting a paycheck, having my benefits really kind of focused. And I had a lot of my counterparts who didn't commission. They were doing the what am I going to do shuffle. After 4 years of school, they were still trying to get into the job market, right? These are accomplished guys and gals still struggling to figure out where they wanted to be. Yeah. Deliberate decision, right? But I felt like I made the right one for me, for sure.
I think so.
So really, it's a matter of every decision you're going to make is deliberate. Whether or not you have no idea and you decide I'm going to go and Uber or do any kind of gig thing, just
whatever it is,
whatever you want to do, you're making a deliberate decision. So I think it's important that they look at services as being an avenue to get to reach their goals. Well, let me tell you, I've been in the Army for 23 years. It doesn't necessarily define who I am, but I know that the Army's going to say, hey, you need to go home soon, John. And I'm going to have to grow up and...
Not that they don't love you.
Exactly. I'm going to have to go do something else, right? Yeah. And so what will I get into afterwards? Of course, I'm going to parlay what I've done in the Army. But it's a way, though, I'm using the Army for the career and then move on to other things as well. So even as a career person. So it's always, and just like in the civilian sector too, we've got to look at them the same way.
But it's smart. I mean, that's what you should do in any career. But we talk about this. We actually talked about this with Lieutenant Colonel Levesque in a previous podcast. You know how a lot of soldiers and just Marines, any service member, they don't understand how valuable their service is and how much they could apply that to a civilian role after they get out. Right. And I don't think enough is said about that. So it's wonderful that you're not only advising that people do that, but you're doing that for yourself. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I liked about what I just heard you discussing was we have a different kind of culture even for students and young people in this area. You mentioned the stress, and I mean, as a former Catholic school kid myself, I can definitely speak to that when you're in high school and there's a lot of pressure. Yeah. And a lot of around here it starts in kindergarten. The stress is just there. So if people know, okay, there's not just one path. I don't have to, go straight to Harvard, go straight to Stanford, whatever. There's another potential path
Yeah.
if you keep an open mind about it, or if you know that that's an option.
Yeah.
So I think what's wonderful is you're really, you're understanding the area that we're in here, and the culture that you're dealing with, and adjusting accordingly, and developing this strategy that I think is going to be incredibly successful. And I can't wait to hear, the outcome of this. Because I really think you're on the right track, and in getting the message out there in the right way.
Right. And I think I should also add, I'll give an example, because we're in a very high achieving focused area, right?
For sure.
So I actually have one of our senior staff officers. He was an active duty officer for several years, about, let's say, half a decade. And he found himself getting out of the Army, used his skills. Now he's an executive at a major telecom in the Midwest. And he's an Army Reserve colonel. And he's a high performer. So when we look at our senior leaders in the Army Reserve, these guys have ridiculously great resumes. They're executives, they're, top level scientists, engineers, and they live that dual life because they're using one skill set to feed the other, and back and forth. Whether or not they came in as an Army Reserve soldier, or they brought a skill over. But you're exactly right. Both of those can support one another. And then when they leave service, the ability to deal with build systems, lead people, build teams, those are skills that they excel at.
They translate, and it's so consistent across the branches. So it's just like making sure people understand that they can apply that, again, to a civilian role down the road.
Right.
So, it's just really, it is a good career opportunity, and I'm just, again, glad that you're getting the message out there. And, I mean, I have exhausted every question that I had for you, but, I mean, if there's anything else that, you can, that we didn't address.
Sure. Excuse me. I'd like to talk a little bit about, other areas that I focus partnership on, and that's the volunteer and nonprofit space.
Yes.
So, the Army does a great job of getting soldiers ready for supporting whatever mission that we're assigned. Okay. But the culture and climate that stands behind a service member is their family, and then the volunteers that support it, right? Only so much the government can do and fund and support.
Sure.
But in this area, we have a huge number of small organizations, much like yours, that are speckled all over the place. And I don't know if it's based off of our 20 some odd years of persistent conflict in the global war on terror, if that started it. But it's the community getting engaged and supporting. So thank you very much for what you do for our veterans. And thank you to all of the organizations out there that try to do something to support. That means a ton to families and service members. You and I were talking before this about essentially the operational cycle for an Army Reserve or a Guardsman, for that matter, when they deploy, and the support they have or they don't have while they're gone to their family, and then what it looks like when they come back. I mentioned earlier about the Fort Braggs of the world, the Fort Hoods of the world, the 82nd Airborne Division, the 1st Cavalry Division. When those units deploy, their families all live in one area, right? They're all living on the Fort Hoods and the Fort Braggs. So the commander's support program, those volunteers, it's very centric to that location. They can have routine meetups. They can disseminate information amongst spouses and friends and parents and whatnot. And the support structure is there. When the soldier returns, there's a huge support structure for that soldier as they reintegrate with their family and then begin the retraining process. Guardsmen and Army Reserve soldiers, when they deploy, oftentimes they may not even be deploying from their reserve center they've been training. Maybe they've been cross-loaded and now they're 2 states away is the new unit they've been assigned to because perhaps they volunteered or they were just cross-leveled. And so now they leave their family, they go on that deployment. Their spouse or their their significant other or their parents or whatnot are over here. They don't necessarily know what's going on, so that network is extremely stretched. So they don't really know. Maybe they're getting the phone calls from the deployed soldier every on occasion, but there isn't that cohesive village of support that exists. Then when that service member comes back, they redeploy to that reserve center, and then a few weeks later, they're reintegrated and they're expected to go back to work. And so again, that network isn't always there.
Yes.
So the volunteer organization network is tremendous for those soldiers and who are serving, for those families, and for the veterans who find themselves without that tribe. We had a former chief of the Army Reserve, General Lucky. He used to, whenever he did face-to-face engagements with us, he would always say, hey, what is the thing that people don't have on the outside? They don't have a mission necessarily, and they don't have a tribe. And the unit always ends up being the tribe, but an extension of that tribe and family is the organizations that support. So one thing that I make sure that we work with in my realm of work, and particularly with our Army Reserve ambassadors, is identifying those supporting volunteer organizations that are regional, that bring some kind of bring a level of support to the force in our area.
Which I can't thank you enough for doing, because it really does help, just, coming from our side of things, where when you have that support system to get the resources that, your organization provides onto the base where it's needed, mm-hmm. to the families, that, because there's that whole, still serving side, the active military family side, which is so significantly different from the veteran side.
Right.
So it really does take, the influence and the support of those, especially in your rank and, those
mm-hmm.
in your command, to really be receptive of what, we're offering and allow access when it's needed.
Right.
So it's very much appreciated on all sides.
Right.
So, and I thank you for your kind words. That really meant a lot.
Oh, right. So, commanders need tools that,
right.
A lot of tools that work on their own, and your networks help those out. Also, frankly, us leaders in uniform, we're in the business of making veterans. We bring in soldiers, we train them, we make veterans. But if we're supporting our service members, that transition to becoming a veteran outside is a much smoother. They already know where resources are if times get tough. Transition is tough. I mean, I'm about 5 years out from my transition. Yeah. I'm in a pretty good position, to transition, but still it's a significant event. And I can only imagine what a younger soldier is going through, who's, going back to the world is still their oyster, right?
That's right.
And so making sure that those resources are identified, that the soldier knows about them, maybe they can learn what not to do.
Lessons learned. Yeah.
Right, lessons learned. It makes that transition and changes their tribe in a better way.
And that's what a lot of the transitional hard times that you hear about is, somebody may have gone in when they were 18. Mm-hmm. That's all they've known for, yes. Depending on how long they've been in. And the longer somebody's in, I think the more ingrained they are into the culture of the military. And that's their friend group, their peer group. It's what they know. Yep. And, it's almost like just a huge shock to go from that into, the next phase of life. And then go to where a lot of civilians don't have a frame of reference.
Right.
And it's not that, you can't relate to anyone, but it's just, it's just different.
Right.
And I think preparing people for that mental side of it is one thing, but having that support system, like what you're advocating, that is a lot more helpful and productive than just sending somebody back out right. without the resources they need, which that's been some people's literal transition out. And I think the outcomes are, less favorable when that's right. the case. So you're really helping make somebody's transition a lot
exactly.
smoother.
I probably should have brought this up earlier. So you mentioned in my bios that I was a TPU soldier, a part-time soldier for right. a while. And so I kind of went through that transition hardship, and I used the Army Reserve to help me with that.
Oh, okay.
So I did about 4 years of active duty time. So imagine leaving the United States to Germany at 22 years old for 4 years, deploying the global war on terror, and then getting out in Germany and coming back to the United States as a 27-year-old. It's like, where am I now? This is not where I left, right? You have no idea what's really going on. Fortunately, I found work, and then I just realized I'm missing the mission. I'm missing my tribe, and I was in Texas with my wife, and we had one on the way, our first child, and I said I need to find something, and the Army Reserve. There was an Army Reserve unit that was like 3 miles down the street from me.
So meant to be.
And it was a training unit. So I said, I'm to sign up. Yep. I forget how long it was. It was an easy transition. This is a year out. I was only gone for a year, and I started drilling. And let me tell you, there was a large population of guys and gals who had just left active duty, and it was almost like a monthly therapy session. So we would go there, we would train, we'd have our lunch, talk about war stories, take off some of the stress, train again, leave. And it was fantastic. And then you got re-energized into the mission, understanding the culture, feeding that need. And of course things progressed, and I came back on active duty as a full-time reserve soldier. But the Army Reserve provides that also for our veterans. It's a stepping stone, right? One, continuum service, and then also the help of transition, because I mentioned to you those executives that work in our headquarters. They're business owners, they're employers, they're guys who have networks. And so it's a great opportunity to transition your skills, transition your service, and kind of let down yourself easy.
For sure.
If you want to go complete civilian.
I think that's a great point. And that's something you need to highlight too on your road trip here, because you know it's going to be really something that resonates with a lot of people, especially those who have already they've served, and they need that kind of like stepping stone, like you're saying. I think you're doing a huge service in letting people know what their options are, and I really love hearing this, and I'm serious. I want to hear how this goes.
Sure.
And, anything we can do to lend support through the foundation, happy to do it, because I really believe in this mission. You're welcome to come back anytime, and, we will be in touch.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Cost of Courage podcast. For more on the foundation, please visit our website, thecostofcouragefoundation.org. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.